We are ready to commence. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being still with us on a Friday afternoon, late afternoon. It's my pleasure to facilitate this session in which we're going to speak about two key sectors impacted by climate change, agriculture and forestry. But agriculture has a double hat. It's heavily impacted by climate change, but it also contributes to climate change. So basically, it's a problem, but also a solution. So we look at that, and we would like to take one lens, which is the multifunctionality of agriculture. So agriculture, it's not only producing food for the country, so food security for the country, but it's also providing the livelihood of many farmers in Pakistan. It's not only a livelihood, but it's also an important part of the nutrition dialogue, because it's important to produce safe food for the citizens. And it's also important to protect that livelihood, to ensure it doesn't contribute to climate change, and to invest to make this happening. So we have distinguished panelists, and I'm very happy to introduce the first one, which will give a broad perspective on forest agriculture and natural resource in general. Is Mr. Malik Amin Aslam, former Minister for Climate Change. The floor is yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Florence, for the introduction. And I would like to thank the Dawn Group for a remarkable event that is happening in Islamabad. And this morning when I woke up and I got my Dawn paper in the morning, I saw some good news and some bad news. The good news was that climate change was finally the top headline of a major daily newspaper in Pakistan. And almost half the paper was dedicated to issues related to climate change. And the bad news was that within the same paper, the news was that the January that we just passed was the hottest January recorded in history. And we know it in Pakistan. I'm also happen to be a farmer. We know it in Pakistan because the water is drying up. We're almost in the middle of a drought now. For 4 months, we haven't had any rain. It's almost 40% less than what it normally was. And as a farmer, when you don't get rain, that's a serious issue. And this has been happening in Pakistan for so many years now. But the 2 points that I would like to talk over here about is that firstly, climate change is no longer about climate talk. It is all about climate action. What we need on the ground is what is important. We've had a host of conferences. I've been on the climate change circuit for over 20 years now, and I see many faces in the crowd which have been with me. We've been talking about climate change for a long time, but in Pakistan now, climate change has gate crashed into the room. We don't have the luxury of time at our hands. We don't have the luxury of making plans or strategies to deal with this situation. We are already in a crisis situation. So I think what we need is stuff to go on the ground. And the most important thing in this aspect is that we need to shift the whole development paradigm. I mean, I was listening to the speeches yesterday. They were all lamenting about climate finance not being available. That is a reality. But what is also a reality is that climate finance is not going to be falling from the sky to vulnerable countries like Pakistan. Climate finance is something which actually follows climate action. This is my experience of being in government twice in the climate change ministry, that when you do stuff which is good for you, which you prioritize yourself, climate finance follows you. But when you wait for climate finance to happen, it never happens. And I'll give you an example that, we started during the government, we thought that, we would start doing something on the ground. And we started 4 initiatives. The Billion Tree Tsunami was the first initiative which was started in 2014, and it was a project which started in the KP province and then grew into the 10 billion tree project in the federal government. But it was a project that really shook the world. It really shook the world because it was ahead of its time. We were planting trees with our own money. There was no climate finance involved. We just shifted the development kettle to give us the money to do that with political commitment. But when that project was happening, we saw a lot of climate finance, a lot of donors coming on board, trying to follow that act, trying to push us in that act, which was a homegrown solution. Similarly, Living Indus was the second initiative which was started. Florence, you would know about that. And it was started, again as a homegrown initiative. And again, it has managed to attract climate finance. Not because it was waiting for climate finance, but because it attracted climate finance when we started doing the actions ourselves. Recharge Pakistan is another project that we started, and the Protected Area Initiative. Now, the second point I wanted to make was that all these 4 projects had one thing in common. We were trusting and investing in nature. These were all nature-based solutions. And it was my firm belief that climate change will not get solved unless we make peace with nature. So I think this session is extremely important because the 2 sectors we're talking about over here, agriculture and forestry, are both sectors in which we have an opportunity to make peace with nature. For the forestry sector, I will just go through some of the lessons that we learned while we were planting all those billion trees. There were 4 main lessons that we learned during that time. The first one was that we have to be flexible and we have to be very humble when we're talking about dealing with nature. You deal with nature with a lot of humility and you plan with a lot of flexibility. We started with, in the project, we thought that we'll do a lot of afforestation, very less assisted natural regeneration. But when we ended, and nature taught us that lesson, that assisted natural regeneration is what works, and when you leave nature to do its own job, but you give it the protection. The second point that we learned was that climate change dealing has to be people-centric. You have to get the people involved. You have to get the people involved in climate change for it to make an impact. And I think, again, the forestry that we did, we turned the model around from being dependent on the forest department to being dependent on the communities who are the actual stakeholders and the community guardians for so many centuries. We gave them the ownership and they turned around the whole project. The third lesson we learned was transparency is very important when you're dealing with any money, any development money, but especially when you're dealing with climate-specific funding. So we had, for the first time ever in Pakistan, we got third-party performance audit done by WWF, IUCN, and FAO combined. They were looking at the project, which was government money, which was not money given by any donor, but it was government money, and the government itself said that we want to get transparent in spending this money. And finally, the fourth point was that when you go into the ground to deal with climate change, you will confront vested interest mafias. We confronted the timber mafia, we confronted the land mafia, and you have to do that with a lot of political will behind you. So I think it is important that we learn all these lessons, and the most important one is that we have to make peace with nature. So climate smart agriculture, vermicompost, and we have a lot of practitioners. I was very glad to be on this panel because it has actual practitioners who are putting their heart and soul in the ground trying to confront climate change. So let us all do it together. And again, I would like to congratulate Dawn for making this remarkable effort in Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, for the next speaker, we just heard that nature should be at the center of anything. So how do you make agriculture as a farmer? How do you make agriculture respectful to nature? And we have the privilege to have Malika Fak Ahmed Tiwana, CEO of Farmers Associate Pakistan.
Thank you, thank you. First of all, we are here on the second day at the fag end of this lovely conference. So the audience that I see in front of me, I'd like to categorize you as the truly committed. So yesterday was a hall full, and today we are a bit less than that. So thank you for being here. Thank you. So if we, and in the course of these last 2 days, I have had a happy realization that people understand that agriculture is at the forefront and at the center of the climate calamity. So this realization, I thought I would have to convey, but it seems that this realization is very much there, and it seems I may be preaching to the converted already. So let me just go back a little bit and talk about how our agriculture is designed. This happened probably 100 years ago when the canal colonies were constructed. Canals were built out of the 5 rivers, and irrigated agriculture started to take place. Now, all this was according to a design. It was all designed for a certain kind of agriculture. So each family was, generally speaking, each family was given 25 acres of land, 20 minutes of water from the outlet per acre, and every 7 to 10 days they would get this water as their turn came once again after the first, it's called Varabandi. So then 4 generations later, 75 years now, that whole scheme had become quite ill, quite unwell, because the 25-acre plot had now turned into a 5-acre plot or a 4-acre plot as different generations came upon its ownership, and this land got subdivided. Was really not performing its duty as efficiently as it should have according to the original design. So each farmer originally was getting 7 to 8 hours of water availability at his farm every week. Now, the farmer is getting maybe 40 minutes or 60 minutes, and all of a sudden, it is just not being able to do the work that it was supposed to do. So we have more tube wells coming up, and water is being now pumped out of the ground. So the system was unwell as it was, and then we are hit by climate change. This climate change is like taking somebody who is unwell, has fever, and taking their cot and putting it out in the cold. And so it has actually exacerbated the already dire situation that we were finding ourselves in. And so we must realize that the biggest hit that our semi-arid region is going to face is water. Of course, it's temperature. I'll come to the temperature bit in a while, but it is the water availability that is going to hit us really, really hard and is already doing so. So we are all hearing about glacier melt. We are hearing about the rainfall becoming more erratic. Like Malik Saab just spoke about the driest. I'm a farmer, let me tell you, 4 months we have received no rain in my area, at my farm. 4 months. I don't think I have ever experienced a situation like this for many. I actually do not remember not having winter rains come in. And I think our wheat crop will be affected this way. So the glacier melt is something that we are, of course, experiencing. And this water is going to diminish after a short while. And we must plan for it. And I will give you a solution from a farmer's point of view. I cannot talk of the very macro pictures that most people over here are cognizant with and understand that. But I would like to bring a very important point. 50%, some say 70%, of our water comes from transboundary rivers. It originates from out of Pakistan. It may originate from China, it may originate from India, it may originate from Afghanistan. Now, if that be the case, and the river melt, the glacier melt, and the flow of water does decrease, it decreases for them as well. And when it decreases for them, surely the upper riparian will have to take measures to see to it that their own needs are fulfilled. Therefore, it is extremely important for all of us to realize the problem is going to get worse and exponentially worse. So what do we need to do? We now need to redesign our irrigation system. The supply side irrigation system probably will not work for us for a very long time. So it has to be now demand-based, it has to be priced properly, and there needs to be incredible amount of investment in storage. 90% of Pakistan's water flows through our system in 90 days. That's it. The rest of the 10% is for the rest of the 200 and some days. My mathematics is slow. So we should emphasize that our very existence as farmers, as a population, people who depend, and our population, of course, is increasing every year. Water is the bedrock on which we must start to act. And just like Mr. Trump said, drill, baby, drill, we should be saying store, baby, store. So that, I think, is important for us to. Second is temperature. Look what happened in the rice crop this last year. People who planted rice on time had a 50% decrease, sometimes 70% decrease in their yield. Because just when the seed was forming, the temperature spiked to 48 and 50. Shed its grain. So grain formation didn't take place. And it's like in any living organism, self-preservation is our basic and primary instinct, and reproduction is the secondary primary instinct. So the crop decided to shed the grain just for self-preservation because the temperature went up way beyond its tolerance levels. So, and same thing's happening with maize. When we plant autumn maize in, say, July and August, the temperatures are too high. We just cannot plant. But if we go later and plant our maize, the smog sets in. And again, the crop is very heavily affected. If we go for the January maize crop, I'm just giving you a few examples which are practical, which are hitting us right in the face today. It's happening today. We've lost four crops in a row within this last year. So in in January for our maize crop, it would take 20 days for it to germinate. Today, it is out in 12 days. Of course, the yields will suffer, and we will not have the kind of productivity that we are envisioning. So I've spoken about water, spoken about temperature, and so what are the adaptations? For water, it is storage, storage, storage. Number two, our governments are going ahead with these asinine schemes of giving away free tractors through lottery, giving away, I think they were giving away cows just yesterday through a lottery scheme. Good Lord, if we have some money, let's spend it on infrastructure of the farms so that water efficiency can take place. We go for irrigation systems which are managed, and the government only does not need to pay the whole way. The government needs to look after the viability gap and contribute towards getting the farmer to invest in their systems. Of course, getting new genetics for our seed is primary, but we need to have homegrown solutions. Borrowed solutions from other countries probably will not be sustainable in the long run. And so, so this is the adaptation. So mechanization. Yes, we are burning our stubble, madam, and we are burning our stubble essentially because of a lack of mechanization. Let me tell you this. There is now a trend here, at least in the Punjab, where new equipment has come into play, which is creating a bale for the farmer with his rice stubble, and that bale is now being, it's an economic benefit to the farmer, and definitely the farmer will go ahead. So we need, rather than giving out free tractors and stuff like that, I think more finance, and it could even be linked to climate finance really, needs to be put into baling our biomass. So, thank you, I'm done. Thank you so much. And I think I'll stop here. I've received the notice. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I've lost. So, looking at impact of the climate change on the agriculture sector, looking at the need for nature-based solution, I would like to go now to the other part of the agriculture, one role which is key, which is protecting the livelihood, because when there is climate change, they can be a shock. So what can we do to protect this livelihood? And I would like Kazim Saeed, CEO of Pakistan Agriculture Coalition, to address that part. Thank you so much, Kazim.
Thank you very much, Florence. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good afternoon. I think what Malik Amin Saab has outlined and what Afaq Tiwana Saab has outlined underscores what communities involved in forestry and farmers are going through. So I will cut to the chase and focus on how our farmers can be protected, as Florence asked. Now, agriculture is a sector that, as Florence said, is both a contributor to climate change and also impacted by climate change a great deal. Now, the key thing to remember is that here in Pakistan, we are not a level of contributor on the global stage where we can make a difference, to a huge difference, to the overall impacts on the climate that are causing the change. We must do the best we can, but there is only so much contribution we're making there. But that doesn't mean that we don't protect our farmers. And by the way, I think it's important to also note that farmers in Pakistan, they have a bad rep. People think they're not educated, they don't. Farmers are the most aware of climate change, more than any other Pakistanis. And the reason is, as Malik Amin Saab and Afaq Tiwana Saab have pointed out, farmers have been seeing the impacts of changes in climate for a lot longer than the rest of Pakistan. Because climate is an extremely, agriculture is an extremely climate-sensitive business and a time-sensitive business. So between the 15th of October, in most parts of Pakistan, 15th of October and the 15th of November, if you're not sowing your wheat, the traditional wisdom is that, and some supported by the science, is that every week of delay beyond November 15, in most parts of Pakistan, you're going to see a certain reduction in your, perhaps 1 mond a week by some estimates, that you'll see in your yield. And that window, that optimal window for sowing the wheat has been closing or shifting. And across Pakistan, you talk to farmers and you hear that. Some of the more extreme impacts like the floods and the impacts of drought, etc., temperature changes which allow the whitefly to hit the cotton in September, not just in the previous months as well. These are impacts that farmers have been aware of for a while. And the question is, what can you do about it? And we have the tools. In the 21st century, we have the tools to try to mitigate the financial impact of a failed crop, of a crop devastated by flood, etc., which can set a farmer back for 4 seasons before they can come back to their financial status before that flood. We have the tools, and a key tool that I think Pakistan can leverage is crop insurance. And the critical thing to remember about crop insurance for Pakistan, or a country like Pakistan, is that the insurance industry in our country, in many such markets, does not have the financial heft to take on the risks of agriculture. And typically, this is the case in many markets, and typically what happens is a local insurer takes 20% of that risk, and a global reinsurer takes 80% of the risk, underwrites the risk. And if a global reinsurer is operating in 120 countries, and you have the 2022 floods of Sindh happen in 3 or 4 places, their balance sheet will not get wiped out. And this is something that we from the Pakistan Agriculture Coalition platform has tried to introduce to Pakistan over the last few years. And some pilots have been done which have succeeded, making payouts to farmers for heat wave, for pest attack, for the whitefly I mentioned, also for inundation by floods. And now the government of Sindh is taking this very seriously and planning to do a pilot at some scale. And the federal government and Punjab government are also looking to these solutions. Now, the key thing to remember again is that for agriculture to be able to pay for the insurance, we heard since yesterday we've been hearing that climate finance may not be sufficient globally, and as Malik Amin Saab very wisely said, even if it's there, you move forward and it may come to support you. My contention, my proposal here is that Pakistan is one of the countries, I would say Pakistan is an agricultural superpower. In many, many crops, Pakistan is in the top 10 in production, even though we haven't increased our yield sufficiently. Pakistan is one of those countries that can significantly increase its agricultural output and export the surpluses and be able to pay for some of these investments like crop insurance. And just to give you a little bit perspective on this possibility, for the major food grains, because we're focusing on nutrition, the link between nutrition and climate, the major food grains that are traded in the world, wheat, thank you, wheat, rice and maize, 80% of those trades globally are dominated by just 6 countries. And you know which ones they are: United States, China, Russia, Ukraine, South Africa, perhaps India, Brazil. And none of those countries are able to increase their output very quickly in a matter of years to a significant level. Pakistan, somehow we didn't pay attention to our yields. Pakistan still is far below the averages of yield that it should have. So there is a possibility of increasing yields through better seed, etc., within a few years and generate those surpluses that can bring the revenues to pay for things like crop insurance. And I think that's the key message that I wanted to deliver in this part of the conversation. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kazim, and it brings very well how a farmer, an agriculturalist, is going to increase the production while still protecting being nature positive and export safe food. Big question to you. I'm happy to have Mr. Tamour Malik, agriculturalist and innovative farmer.
Thank you so much. All right, this is working. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's a treat to be here, and I'm very privileged to follow after such great people who've given you a little bit of an idea of how much farmers are suffering from climate change at this point. This is a global phenomenon. There's a smorgasbord of nomenclature that's used for it. It's climateflation, heatflation, saltflation. All over the world, we have dropping yields and crops being destroyed by a series of climate events. And this is, of course, happening in Pakistan as well. In fact, the Syrian civil war, which recently led to finally the ouster of the Assad regime, was also kickstarted by a climate-induced drought. And this is very, very dangerous because we're headed towards, suddenly something can happen that can just tip the scales for entire countries to erupt. God forbid. And that's why tackling this is crucial. And the word apocalyptic was used a few times during this conference. And while this is true, I will hopefully not be a bearer of more bad news, but rather one of hope today. Because using techniques and tools of regenerative agriculture, which is my profession and what I've been doing for the past 8 to 9 years, we have the potential to realize the vision, as the Honorable Kazim Saab said here, which is to make Pakistan an agricultural superpower. We can dramatically enhance yields while doing it in a way, shape, and form that is in harmony with nature, as His Excellency Malik Amin Saab just mentioned, because that is, at the end of the day, what we need. And agriculture is something that gives us a lot of hope if we do it right, because it can become a tool not just of adaptation, but also of reversing climate change and drawing down excess carbon if we do it the right way. And we can draw down the carbon in soils, we can draw it down in trees and shrubs around farming systems, so there's enormous potential. The Honorable Tabana Saab mentioned store, baby, store. And one of the greatest sources or technologies of storing water is actually soil carbon. For every 1% of organic matter that we increase in our soils, we have the capacity to store 27,000 gallons of water. And there are farmers, I'm going to mention, we were talking about yields, so I'll start with that. The world record holder for corn yields is an American farmer named Russell Hendrick. And his yields are mind-bogglingly high. The highest yield in Pakistan for corn is around 110 mons or so. Correct me if I'm wrong. If a farmer gets that, he's jumping up and down with joy. So Russell Hendrick's yields are in the range of about 355 mons per acre. He started in 2012 with soil that had 1.7% carbon, and by 2024, that amount had reached 8.2% carbon. So carbon is really the store of wealth of a farmer if we enact systems and tools that build it in our soils. Next up, I'd like to talk a little bit about nutrient density, because we have a food and nutritional security crisis all over the world. And there are emerging studies that showcase that food that is grown regeneratively has higher nutrients. In fact, I was reading a study out of citrus grove in Florida, where regeneratively grown citrus had 8 times higher nutrients, including antioxidants, vitamin C, etc. So the power of enhancing the nutritional profile of vital micronutrients and other phenolic compounds, stuff that are essential for human existence and health, can be dramatically up-leveled when we do regenerative agriculture right. Now, what is regenerative agriculture? It is a very broad brushstroke term. It's like saying renewable energy, but what type of renewable energy, right? So regen ag is an umbrella term, carries within it a number of tools and techniques. On our farming system, we're privileged we take a very integrative and expansive view. So we do deploy many, perhaps all the known, including cutting edge and bleeding edge tools out there. Recently, we conducted a study, for example, I'll get to that in fact. So we have, we do large scale fungally dominant composts. We do large-scale vermicomposting, biochar we've been doing since 2017. Recently, Google announced the purchase of biochar credits. In fact, Malik Saab and I were talking about this the other day, which is the largest deal of its kind in the world with an Indian company called Varaha, and that's for biochar-based sequestration, because biochar has enormous permanence and it builds soil carbon. It gives space for nutrient and water storage within soils. So it tackles a lot of issues, and it stays in the soil for thousands of years without degrading. So it has permanence. So we deploy a bunch of those techniques. We do cover cropping, minimum and no tillage, high efficiency irrigation systems, fermented inoculants, fermented nutrients, and many other techniques that I won't sort of bore you with today. But the result of that is that we consistently see improved yields, but also much higher resilience to climatic and other shocks. We've dramatically reduced or eliminated the use for insecticides and fungicides. And recently we were doing a proprietary trial of a microalgae strain, which we treated for wheat. So the economic cost for that was extremely low. And I was just there at the farm a couple of days before getting here, and I was pleased as punch to see that we had a 2 tillers increase in the zones of the farm where that wheat was treated with that algae. And if we were to do this at scale across all the 17,000 acres or so where wheat is sown in Pakistan, is thought to be sown, we could create an economic value of $335 million as per today's price of wheat in the international market rights. So these are the biological sort of interventions that we can do that are very much in harmony with nature, that enhance our yields, enhance our nutritional profile, but also build resilience to climatic shocks. Because algae have certain biostimulant properties which also provide higher resistance to drought and other biotic and abiotic stressors. And so that's something that's very hopeful. In Florida, there is a crisis of citrus greening that's put at enormous risk the multi-billion-dollar citrus industry in that country. And there are farmers who've had to destroy hundreds or thousands of acres of citrus orchards in that state of the United States. But there are farmers who've turned to regenerative agriculture, and they have been able to completely eliminate citrus greening from their farms. So citrus greening still shows up. The Huaolongbing virus is still there when you do a soil test, but it is not impacting the plants because you have crafted a microbiome that has lots of the good guys, the good fungi, the good bacteria, the good protozoa, the good nematodes, and all of those keep the bad guys in check. So when you have enough good guys, you don't need, the bad guys cannot flourish. And I'll end with perhaps one example that I'm super bullish and passionate about. We're starting the Pakistan Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, a non-profit, for which I'd urge everybody to join and join the cause and help. And one of the things I'm very passionate about doing with that is having tree and shrub plantations on the boundaries of farms. Because with that one step, if we do it at scale, we can perhaps transform agriculture in ways that are unfathomable. Now, there's a study out of the UK UK that shows that for every £1 we invest in a hedgerow, we get a £4 return. I think that is a massive underestimation. But some of the benefits that we get from that are, we have beneficial insect populations which take care of the bad guys, the pests, and therefore you don't need to use insecticides, right? And similarly, strategically planted hedgerows, they not just give you pollinators and beneficial insects, which is really important because we also have a biodiversity crisis along all over the world. It's called the 6-mass extinction, which we can also tackle on farmland. But also, you can plant trees that give you valuable nutrients. You can plant leguminous trees, you can plant trees like moringa, which are indigenous to this land, also called sohanjina, and you can create a biostimulant out of it, which also up-levels yields significantly, right? So the potential is enormous. We created a composted phosphatic fertilizer, which is one factor by 33%, right? And I haven't even talked about no-till because if I get in there, the economics are just insane. A 33% increase in yield in a side-by-side plot under a center pivot, growing Cortiva maize. Just the only differential was using a French no-till planter. And I understand that you're from France, so it's one of the best planters out there. And I'm not going to use the term that the Honorable Tivana Saab used for the government policies because I'm still a young lad and I have to function here. But what I will do is say that a much better utilization of that resources would be with no-till planters because we can dramatically build soil carbon while enhancing yields with these incredible precision planters that lead to germination rates of over 99%. They plant the seed precisely at the depth and the seed-to-seed spacing that you need for optimal growth. So I'll end there because I could hog the mic for hours, but I hope that I've given you some hope and I've given you something good to think about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you did provide hope. So the next question is, it's possible. So then, how the government is helping, facilitating, so that your knowledge pass on to 8 million families of farmers in Pakistan. And with that, Aisha Humaira, I'm very pleased to introduce Aisha Humaira, who is the Secretary of the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination. Aisha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor and privilege to be with this august audience. I am here not just to share some of the points that I have jotted down, but basically to learn from all of you. I already knew some of the panelists, and it was a great pleasure to see them again, and I'm really thrilled to listen to my previous speaker, and I'm very hopeful that Pakistan's agriculture future is very bright, because if we have such innovative farmers who are working with so much passion, I think this is one profession which really requires passion. If you are not doing it with a lot of passion, it's not really possible to increase productivity under challenging circumstances. So I don't want to repeat the challenges that farmers face. Obviously, extreme weather events, monsoon variability, heat waves, and scarcity of water, all these challenges are there for the farmer. But what is research showing? Research is showing that yes, climate change will decrease productivity, but farmers who follow adaptation, they have the chance to increase their productivity 50 to 55%. In certain cases, it can go even further than that. So I think for Pakistan, climate change also provides an opportunity to rethink about our practices and make sure that farmers are following the adaptation practices, and through those practices, they are able to increase their productivity. So some of the initiatives that government has taken is to promote smart farming. Government is encouraging drip irrigation and water conservation. Recently, a very good project has started in collaboration with development partners. It's called Recharge Pakistan, So as our dear panelist Afaq Saab was saying, that we must save water. So the objective of recharge water project is to preserve water, and it's creating wetlands and water recharge stations across Pakistan. In KPK, it will create a recharge station in Diyai Khan. In Sindh, it's in Manchar. In Balochistan, it's in Chakkar, Lahiri, and in Punjab, it's in Tausa and Ramak. So this is a very important project with $77 million. The progress, the work started a few years ago, and now in collaboration with WWF, we have launched this project. And we hope that these 5 or 6 water recharge destinations will multiply, and we will have progressive farmers coming forward, learning from these practices, and will be part of the practices in the future in multiplying these wetlands and water recharge stations. So if you look at the total wetlands that Pakistan has created up till now in collaboration with the provinces, those are 225. And it covers 9.7% of the covered area of Pakistan. If we look at the forest area that we have in Pakistan, it's 5% of the total. And another important area which is extremely important for conservation is designation of protected areas. Why it's important to designate protected areas? Because you have to protect your biodiversity. You have to ensure that there are enough trees, there are sanctuaries which protect the local varieties. So we have exceeded the international requirement, and it's almost 20%. And UNEP recently appreciated Pakistan's work on protected areas. Another very important initiative that government has taken is the upscaling Green Pakistan, which the former minister also mentioned. The previous government started it, and 50 billion have been spent on that project. The project continues. Now there is an additional 70 billion allocated to that project, and it includes tree plantation and protection of the protected areas, wetlands, and ensuring biodiversity. So 2.3 billion trees have already been planted. It has really helped to increase Pakistan's green areas. Besides that, I would also like to inform you that there are a lot of new varieties have come out as a result of Pakistan's agriculture research system. There are 14 drought-resistant varieties which are now available in the market. There are 4 rice varieties which have shown increase in yield even if the water usage is less as compared to other varieties. Similarly, there is a rice variety which survives even if it's covered underwater for 14 days. So that will help farmers even in case of flood. So the research system is actually the backbone of agriculture. And up till now, if we look at the expenditure that governments make on research, although is not, I would say remarkable, it's 0.2% of the GDP, but we hope that it will, by 2030, it will increase to 1%. Similarly, Food Security Ministry in collaboration with the provincial agriculture departments is very well integrated with the research systems of FAO and CGIAR, and I think that is the strength that we have in Pakistan, that we are very well entrenched into the global research system. We are very closely linked with International Rice Research Institute, CIMMYT, where a lot of wheat varieties were developed. So I think we do have great strength in terms of our research systems. Participation of private sector recently has really enabled the system, and now more and more private sector is encouraged. A lot of innovation is coming here. Tech-based solutions are there. We have a lot of IT startups who are now helping the farming sector. They are looking at water conservation, the pesticide used in it. So that type of monitoring has also been very helpful to the farmer. Met department, through their early warning system, is also helping the farmer. Now 72 hours before the rain or any extreme weather, they can inform the farmer about those extreme events, and then farmers can take precautionary actions. I think that's enough from my side.
Thank you very much, Aisha. So we have two other panelists, and I'll take Aisha Khan first, because it goes, you know, when we see a progressive farmer, an innovative farmer, you know, he might need a bit of push, access to finance, to push to the next level. So Aisha is working as a climate change expert and emerging markets. So she's going to speak about, and in Acumen, sorry. So I'm sure she's going to speak about access to finance.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Florence. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And wow, I decided to get up because who would expect in Islamabad in February for things to be so hot? Talk about climate change. I came from Karachi, half my suitcase was packed up with shawls and jackets, and I walk here and I'm like, wait, this is actually very real in a fundamental way, as all of us are sitting here. So thank you again for being here at the late end of the second day. And if you thought we were done with the climate finance piece of it, unfortunately you're not, because this is all I do actually. And as Florence mentioned, I work in climate. My team and I have set up the first climate equity fund in Pakistan. And so when you ask about what that means, it's a private equity fund. It's a $90 million fund that will be investing entirely in agribusinesses. So from that perspective, where capital is flowing into the country, where it should flow, is very much on top of my mind. This is exactly what I think about. And so one of the first questions everyone asks me when I say, oh, we're going to invest 90 million in Pakistani agribusinesses and help them respond to climate change, help them build the future of climate-resilient agri-systems. Honestly, the first question is, wait, but is it even investable? The sector is such a disaster. It's really, there's nothing there. You cannot do this, it doesn't make sense, and really you should take your money elsewhere. And so at that point, I give them a couple of statistics, which I'll share with you. You know, the sector is, Kazim touched on some of these. These are the things to be optimistic about. It's $90 billion contributing towards our GDP. We are truly, and this was a surprise to me because I'm not deep in agriculture. I learned we have the third largest stock of livestock, third largest producer of dairy. I think we are the fourth or fifth largest producer of rice. So much happening, and over the past few years, when you look at the growth of the economy, the agriculture sector actually has been growing at 3 times the growth of the economy. Now, those of you who are economists might step back and be like, yeah, but the last few years, the growth was very slow anyway, so what do you mean? But it's still growing at 3 times the rate of the economy. So when I give you all of these numbers, and if I've convinced you enough, you might say, oh, well, then what's the problem? You guys are doing really well. It seems like you have everything. And then you step back underneath it and say, well, actually, absolutely not. And it's not just because of the havoc that floods have wreaked on Pakistan. We saw it in 2022, a third of the country underwater. We've talked about it. But really, at its core, when you look at over 85% of your farmers, most of whom are small, by the way, do not have access to finance. And what that means is they're not able to invest in actually planting what should be the right thing for them to plant, given what the market is telling them. They just don't have the financing. They don't know how to store. We end up wasting a lot of what we produce. Our yields are very, very low. So we're doing this well with such low yields. So that should tell you about the fundamental, the ability we have to actually produce so much more. And mechanization, we've talked about it a little bit, but our farmers need almost twice the amount of power and energy that we already have available to them. So it's a long uphill task. There's massive potential and there's lots more to be done. And so then the third question I get asked, which is when I'm trying to raise funds for this, it's well, okay, you've convinced us agriculture is at the core of Pakistan's economy. It's the backbone. 2 out of 3 Pakistanis live in rural areas, are entirely dependent on agriculture. It feeds into every sector, all our export sectors. It is so high potential. There's so much you guys can do. Why hasn't it happened already? That's the question then. Why is it that we're still talking about lack of storage capacity, lack of access to credit, lack of power on farms, the wrong seeds, the wrong information just not being available? And there are many answers to this, and we can go off into the history of agri-systems and land holdings and all of the incentives in place. But I think one thing bears repeating, and if this is my only message to you, I think it would be this, is that systems and markets and individuals largely behave in very rational ways. So whatever the incentives are, the systems will respond accordingly. So when we, as a nation, talk about why is Pakistan not getting access to climate finance, there are trillions of dollars floating around. We are the 5th or 8th most vulnerable. However you cut it, we're massively vulnerable. Why aren't we getting it? The system responds rationally. That capital will flow to a space where it has the highest return. And what is true at a national level is true at the farmer level. So let's step back a little bit and see what our farmers are doing. If you think about places where production and yields have actually improved in Pakistan, you can take some guesses. All right, it's not cotton. Cotton has gone down by half over the past few years. Why? No real incentives to produce. Rice has gone up by 50%. Rice. It's not a strategic crop. And what has actually doubled is corn or maize. So you can ask yourself, why is it that farmers are making these decisions? And the response to that is fairly simple. Rice has an export driver. There are markets available for farmers to sell to. Corn is a huge input in poultry feed. And so it actually ends up having clear incentives for farmers. We can keep telling farmers to use climate-resilient, regenerative models of producing, but unless we create the right marketplaces for them, the right incentives for them, it is not going to happen. No one is actually making decisions on the basis of, by the way, this is excellent for the country, let me grow this product. And so if you take away support prices for wheat, you will have certain outcomes in the wheat market. And let's be very clear on what that means. We can make those choices. All of them have an outcome. Markets, individuals, companies, private equity funds like mine work in very, very rational ways. So as we sit here, we can think of ourselves as consumers. If we want to eat better quality food produced using sustainable technologies where farmers get a living wage and actually are paid for what they're producing, are we willing to pay for it? Are we setting the right incentives? If we want to grow companies that are doing exactly this, what Taimur's doing and what so many entrepreneurs are actually building as well, really, really building on what Pakistan needs, are we creating the right incentives for this? It's a question for me as well as an investor. Am I financing that change? And again, step back again as a nation. We can keep talking about agriculture and resilience and someone else should fund it. Are we creating the right incentives and the right structures for this. So questions for all of us to ask ourselves. Obviously, I'm one of the believers in change and in doing what it takes. And I hope all of you, certainly, again, engaging at this amazing conference that Dawn has put together, can collectively come together, because it is a system-wide shift. It affects each and every one of us. And so I hope we can all come together on moving this issue forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aisha. So I want to introduce you the last but not the least. She's a colleague of mine and a friend of mine. She's from the United Nations. She's the director, the country director of the International Financing IFAD, Fund for Agricultural Development. I don't even know the acronym. I've been so used to use the acronym. Because why not the least? Because IFAD is working for the smallholder farmers, and I don't think we are representing them today. Let's be fair, in the panel, none of us, me included. So, and in Pakistan, 90% of the farmers have less than 5 hectares. So incentives. So the incentives is a key thing for farmers, but sometimes when you are very poor, when you are very vulnerable, you cannot even respond to incentives. So I'll give the floor to Fernanda, who is going to speak about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Florence, and good afternoon to everyone. Dear panelists, it's a pleasure to be here in this panel. Well, I would like to take a step back and begin by highlighting the importance of agriculture in the Pakistan economy. So the sector contributes 23% of GDP, and in the rural areas, it employs about 80% of the workforce. And the smallholder farmers, they are precisely the backbone of the agricultural sector in Pakistan. They are contributing to national food security, and they are also contributing, they could do much more, but they are contributing to exports earnings. But yet, why it's so challenging when we speak about smallholder farmers? They are among the groups in the world that are mostly affected by the impacts of climate change. In Pakistan, as Florence just said, 90% of farmers, 7.4 million farmers are smallholder farmers, and they are cultivated in very small pieces of land. So when you speak about climate and smallholder farmers in Pakistan, the challenge is huge. As you all know by now, climate change really makes agriculture increasingly more uncertain. It threatens the natural resource base, it threatens the soil, the water, all the elements that smallholder farmers depend on to be able to produce. But why specifically then smallholder farmers are so vulnerable? Well, they have very few assets to fall back on, and they have very limited capacity to respond when there are climate shocks. In Pakistan, besides this very unequal land distribution that I just mentioned before, smallholder farmers, they face a lot of challenges. They mostly rely on rain-fed agriculture. They are mostly marginalized from markets. They rely on middlemen to sell their produce. They don't access improved seeds, improved inputs, technology, and financial service. They are basically cash constrained, meaning that they must sell their crops at harvest many times, and when pricing is very low. But then one could ask, okay, with all those challenges, you would expect that climate finance is really going to smallholder farmers. But no, surprisingly, the response is no. So climate finance currently is not serving smallholder farmers. So there's a figure that really surprised me. Only 0.8% of global climate finance goes to smallholder farmers. IFAD, as Florence said, we have two hats. We are an UN agency and also international financial institution with this specific mandate to invest in smallholder farmers and the rural populations. So IFAD has been always advocated, and we should all do that, advocate for more climate finance for adaptation of smallholder farmers to the climate change. But then going to Florence' question, now, how can we do that? How can we support smallholder farmers adapt to climate change? I think a very important area to look at, some of the panelists also mentioned that, is to support them to increase their productivity. You know, levels of productivity is very low in Pakistan currently, but precisely by implementing climate resilient practices. But this means access to knowledge. This means access to finance. This means access to technology. So we really need to, I would say, to really step up our efforts to promote high-value crops, climate-sensitive value chains, to promote green entrepreneurship, green technology, innovation. Just to give you an example, in one of our IFAD-funded projects in Gilgit-Baltistan, we are supporting smallholder farmers to adopt technology, tunnel farming, to be able to grow vegetables in very mountainous region of Gilgit-Baltistan during the whole year, meaning that they can then add to their nutrition of their households and also to increase their incomes. But then again, we really need to take collective action to be able to bring those incentives. One thing that's very important, we need to modernize also the agriculture sector to be able to attract the young population. You know, the youth, they don't want to do agriculture as their parents were doing. They don't want to have the same kind of labor burden, and they are very keen to adopt technology. They are very keen to adopt ICT, digital technologies, to adopt new solutions such as renewable energy, and then we should tap on that. Especially, I would say there are very promising opportunities to involve the youth in the agro-processing stage, in the packaging stage, in the food technology stage, so just to mention some of them. Okay, so now with this I spoke about agricultural production, the primary production, because we know that smallholder farmers, the highest climate risks they face is precisely in the production stage. But still, if you want to have climate interventions in value chains, we should look also at the pre-production and the post-production stage. So thinking about pre-production, now it's important to how to give smallholder farmers access to, as the Secretary was mentioned today, to these drought-resistant, climate-resilient seed varieties, how to give them access to better inputs, to modern technology, to small machinery. One of the panelists also mentioned this challenge. Access to financial service. They should reach smallholder farmers, access to information service. Also, if you think about the post-production side, again, we should support smallholder farmers in being able to reduce food loss, which is very huge in Pakistan, to increase food safety, and this is an area that FAO has value chain. So thinking about post-harvesting management practices, thinking about new renewable energy source, thinking about green labeling, certification, those are all areas that we need to work on to be able to address the climate risks in the value chains. I wanted to highlight one strategy that IFAD is promoting in Pakistan that has been very successful, and I think we should do much more here, which is to, of course, it's not new, but I think it is to support smallholder farmers to organize into cooperatives. I came from my previous dissertation, I was based in Latin America, and in Latin America, smallholder farmers are pretty much organized around producers' organizations, around cooperatives. I see here in Pakistan, this is in a very incipient stage. I understand there are also historical reasons for that. But it's possible. In Gilgit-Baltistan, again, it's a project where we were able to support the formation of over 100 cooperatives from smallholder farmers. And then it's very important for these farmers to be able then, through these cooperatives, to increase the product quality, to be able to add value to their products, to be able to access financial service, access information service, and also connect to the private sector and the markets. The last area I would like to highlight is one of the panelists also mentioned, the agricultural water nexus. No? Pakistan is a very water-stressed country, but smallholder farmers, they really are the ones bearing most of the challenges. They rely on the rain for the water most of the case. So again, there are a lot of solutions to improve water use in agriculture, to make it more efficient, to make it more resilient. In IFAD, we are also promoting rainwater harvesting, water storage, irrigation channels. So this is a very key area to work. And then to conclude, I just want to then a question is, how can we then promote this paradigm shift, I would say, in smallholder farmer agriculture? Well, as I said in the beginning, expanding climate finance to agri-food systems and to smallholder farmers is very important. And to this, we need to bring together international financial institutions, national and commercial banks. We need to crowd in investments from the private sector, as we saw today. This is very neat. And finally, we need to have the right government policies in place to be able to support smallholder farmers to access markets and to invest in the public goods, such as infrastructure, roads, warehouse, information systems, and agricultural extension. So in a nutshell, and to conclude, I would say resource policies and partnerships are central to our efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fernanda. So I'm just told that we have 5 to 10 minutes more. So I would like to ask 2 questions. One is to a former government minister. What would you have done differently? And the second question is to the farmers. We heard about incentive is key. If you were in the shoes of the government, what would you do? Can I? So.
Thank you very much. Well, if you ask me what would I have done differently, I think invested more in private sector. I think the chasm between the public sector and the private sector is extremely wide, and it is usually not bridged. And as you can see from the panel over here, the hope is coming from the private sector, because the private sector is leading where the government is lacking. So I think that's a bridge that governments need to cross, and they need to create the facilitative environment for that to happen. And if that happens, then you have a solution out there.
And to answer your other question, what would I do if I were lucky enough to wake up in the corridors of power? I would use the financing powers of the government. There are so many, especially, firstly, I want to be in the provincial government because that's where the money is. And when you have the moolah, how do you deploy it, right? And again, going back to what the Honorable Tawana Saab said, you have to be very strategic. So one of the things I'd want to use it on is creating service-based models where farmers are served with technologies that are regenerative and soil building, such as no-till planters, harvesters for rice, straw, those types of strategic investments. And then the other thing I would do is completely overhaul the extension service. I'd go all Doge and Elon Musk on them, but replace them with people who can actually get the job done, because this is a knowledge-based paradigm thing. And as the honorable speaker from IFAD mentioned, yes, there's financing is one pillar, there's technology, that's another, but the third pillar is a knowledge-based system. So the lowest hanging fruit in all of this that requires the least amount of money is transferring knowledge. And there are things that farmers can do on farmlands that are transformational, that don't require ginormous amounts of capital, right? It can be done in a very frugal and economically, efficient way, but that's not possible until you accelerate the knowledge-giving paradigm, right?
Very clear. So Kazim, up to you to conclude.
Well, I think with such an august panel, the hope and the ambition that we've heard, I think agriculture is a sector where it's been there for millennia. A lot of the talk we heard in the last 2 days makes you feel like we are nearing the end of time, end of the world. Really, it's more like when we began, the beginning of time, when the horses started learning how to gallop and the butterflies first flapped their wings, and human beings started doing cotton first. And I tell you, that happened in this land. The earliest that archaeologists and anthropologists date cotton cultivation is at the ruins of Mehergarh, near the town of Sibbi in Balochistan. And we have seen, this region has seen civilizations getting wiped out, and there's something to learn there. Now, because of that vast, stroke of the arc of history that climate change reminds us of, I think it's important to look at the wisdom we have received from the speakers at this panel. And Malik Amin Saab talked about how you have to be humble and make peace with nature. That there's wisdom there. Afaq Tiwana Saab talked about the build-up of the agriculture sector and how it's reached a point where he was very euphemistic, saying it's unwell. I would say that the systems built over many decades ago, they reached in agriculture sector, they reached their goals some decades ago. Then they started dysfunction, then deterioration. Now they're bankrupt. And in this country, this is a moment of hope because we are seeing some of those systems from 75 years ago or 150 years ago now making way for a new era in agriculture. And the government deciding not to purchase wheat and store it, etc. First time in 60 years, it opens up an opportunity for the private sector to come in and for a new way in the agriculture sector. I think what Temur mentioned about the soil being something that's a store of water, that's something that a lot of people, including farmers, may not value as much as they should. It reminds you of how Rumi, the wisdom from Rumi, Hamanja ki rasad dard, Hamanjas tava. Where the pain emerges is where the medicine is. I think he foretold the COVID-19 vaccine. And we have the irrigation system to fix, to make sure that water is used right. We have the soil to improve the carbon content in, to make sure that we are able to get more productivity. And I think we heard from Secretary Saiba about new varieties and how the productivity gains from adaptation can actually put farmers ahead. But we cannot forget about access to finance. I think Aisha was very passionate about bringing that in. The focus on smallholder farmers, lastly, I think I'm glad that Fernanda mentioned it. We have many solutions for smallholder farmers. Like I mentioned, crop insurance, but the role of government is critical. Where out of 104 countries in the world that have crop insurance schemes, I think 86, including developed countries, have subsidies for insurance premium for farmers, small farmers, and including Pakistan has a bit of that. So there is, I think, hope and a great deal of ambition that this panel is bringing to the table. I think that's where I'll stop. Thank you very much. And a round of applause for our panelists, please.
Thank you, everyone. We will take a brief interval, but please remain within the auditorium. We will let you know when the next session is commencing.